So in the traditional culture, there are behaviors, protocols, things that you do, things that you don't do, with the intention of crafting and controlling the environment that you're in, the external environment, and your internal environment, and the environment of your client, of the patient. Now, all of that together, maybe you could call the milieu of energy, right? The tableau of energy, the milieu of energy, okay? The environment of energy, both, and it's on a gradation of external to internal, okay? So outside this mat is an external environment. And then the mat, the four corners of the mat itself become an internal, more internal environment that we are inhabiting. And then my internal environment, my internal milieu, the way of being in my head, the way of being in my heart, the way of being in my physicality, in my body, that's one internal environment. And then there's another internal environment with all those same characteristics right here, that is the body of my client, the immediate space of the body of my client, and then the two of us together create a sort of microcosm of energy. Microcosm. Now, in the interaction in this environment, I am the active force and my client is receptive. I'm active and my client is receptive. In traditional terms, they would always say male and female. Doesn't matter if I'm a man or not. If I'm a woman in this position, I'm still the male energy. Why? Because I'm the active force. I'm the dynamic force. I'm the one bringing intention to bear. I'm the one orchestrating the orchestra of energy that's going on. So that is traditionally considered a male principle, or yang in Taoism and in Chinese medicine. That's the Taoism influence, right? And the client is receptive, passive receptive, hopefully. Because if they're not, they're hard to work on. But the client is passive receptive, and they're internalizing what I am externalizing. And there is a yin-yang relationship. There is a male-female relationship. There is an active, receptive relationship. There is a third force there, which is the energetic milieu. In other words, the energy that I give you is not mine. The energy that I share with you is not mine. The energy that I'm going to bring to bear to move you toward balance is not mine. So that's the third force. And where does that energy come from? Well, it comes from heaven. It comes from the sun. It comes from the earth. It comes from the five elements. It comes from the wind. It comes from the water. It comes from the wood. It comes from the metal. It comes from the fire. Or in Ayurvedic terms, it comes from the ether. And it comes from the space. But it doesn't come from me. I am, like I mentioned, Grandpa Foolscrow's term, the hollow tube. I'm supposed to convey the energy. I don't create it. And that's why we always say healing, no person can heal another person. It's never happened in the history of the world. It's not happening now. It's never going to happen in the future. Why? Because all healing is based on a relationship between you and spirit, between you and God, between you and your spirit, between you and your God, period, the end. God only is responsible for healing. Man is not responsible for healing. By the way, that is the big issue or big problem with transhumanism, which is this idea that man creates cures, i.e. vaccines or whatever. Doesn't matter. Cure cancer. Oh, I created a cure for cancer, aka I cured cancer. I created a cure for COVID, aka I cured COVID. And see, there's a problem with that, because you didn't. You couldn't. It's impossible. It's implausible, impossible. And it's okay to look in history. If such a thing has never happened in the history of the world, why is it going to happen to you today? You know? However long, whether you believe in short or long evolutionary process or the history of the world, the planet's 1 billion years old, and if in the history of the planet no human being has ever healed another person, you're not going to be the first one, unlikely. That healing has to come from somewhere else. Even Jesus didn't claim to heal anybody. He claimed that the healing came from what? From his Father or from the Spirit. Not from him. He didn't say, I cured you. Okay? And same with the Buddha. The Buddha says there's no healing in Buddhism, but you may experience healing by following natural law, by learning and following natural law, because it is the inclination of nature to heal. People don't heal, nature heals. However, you're natural. I'm natural, I'm nature, you're nature. I can be part of that vehicle of nature to engender the healing. But it comes through me, it doesn't come from me. But now, we're in an environment that's contentious. There are negative energies and there are positive energies. There are negative energies around us and within us. There are positive energies around us and within us. And on the healing side, our tradition has this idea that we can stack the deck in favor of a positive outcome. We can stack the deck. In other words, if I behave a certain way here, and you behave a certain way here, in agreement, there is a likelihood of a positive outcome that will not happen and is not likely to happen if we don't follow those principles. And the core of that teaching we encapsulate in what we call puja. In puja. Okay? So you look at puja right here, it says acknowledge the space, waikru, clean house, petition and prayer, and listen and connect. All right? Now, first thing I want to say real quick is your body is considered a temple. This is not a Christian concept. It's not a Christian concept. All religions categorically state that the body is a temple of God. They may not use those words explicitly the way I did, right? It depends on if you're Muslim or Baha'i or Buddhist or Christian or Orthodox or Pentecostal or what. You might have a different way of saying that, but everybody says that the human being's body is actually, in some mysterious way, some transcendental way, a likeness of God. We are made in the image of God. We are like God in that way. Go ahead.
We're the vessel for God.
We're a vessel, but in many religions it's much more literal than that. No, you are the likeness of God. See, in the Orthodox, you guys may not know much about Orthodox. Orthodox is the largest religion in the world that most people have never heard of. Okay? So for example, in the church, one church that I belong to, the Syrian Orthodox Church, under Mar Basilius Father Adao Pereira, who's the patriarch of our church, we have 9 million active members in our church. We have 9 million active members, mostly in South America and Caribbean, but we have 9 million members in our church. This is like a couple, right? And in the Orthodox Church, one of the teachings of the Orthodox Church is that God doesn't have hands. We're made in the likeness of God, but we're not God, and there's a difference between us and God. And one of the differences between human beings and us is that God doesn't have hands. We do. I want you to think about that for a second. God doesn't have hands. We do. Already that tells you, from the Orthodox point of view, what is one of the reasons why there are human beings. Because God wants to enjoy all experience. And one of the experiences in the microcosm that God wants to enjoy is squeezing things. the joy of squeezing things, the joy of pointing at things, the joy of holding things. God doesn't have hands, you do. So in the Orthodox Church, this is called chirothesia. Chirothesia. In other words, chiro's hand, thesia is God. So we are literally the hands of God. And because God doesn't have hands. And so when I put my hands on someone, if I'm not in the way, ego, personality, artifice, agenda, then it's not me touching the person, it's God. So things can happen in that circumstance that can't happen 2 feet over there. Can't happen 2 feet over there. Because the I that I am here now is not the I that I am over there. And so how do I become the I that I need to be here now? And not the I that I was over there or the I that I am over there, in order to facilitate the magistry of healing with intention right here, right now, when you need it. Not later, not someday, not maybe, but how do I do it right now, on purpose, right now? And so over time, over a long time, people who are paying attention have come up with strategy of how you can take a person who is not special, who may be mentally ill, who is not emotionally competent, who may have physical defect, who may have issues of psychology aside from their mental illness, which are like fear of commitment and phobias and negative emotions and willfulness, and may have compulsions, obsessions, inclinations to not being a good person, to rob you, steal from you, in other words, theft and crime. In other words, all the aberrations of personality that you can imagine, and take a person in that circumstance of life and adjust them in such a way that they are now a good person, living life in a good way, doing things in a good way, no longer causing harm or violence, and in fact, doing exactly the other, being exemplary for stability, discipline, compassion, love, and how to take that person, you would call them a criminal, a psychopath, sociopath, and even the ones who are not in jail, and lead them into becoming a good person, a genuine arhat, exemplary of the highest qualities of what it is the potential possibility to be a human being in the world, in the company of other good people. How do you do that? And they came up with strategies on how to do that. And all the cultures, all the native cultures had their strategies on how to take somebody who's bent and straighten them out. And of course, when I say bent, I mean mind, body, and spirit. However it manifests for you or for whoever, how do we do that? And so one of the ways that they found out was that we can pretend, we can assign ways of behavior and spiritual expression with intention, and that will start to make changes in how people are, internally and externally. So for example, the body is the temple of God, but the first temples made by man were models of the human body. So the oldest temples that we can find anywhere in the world actually are architectural representations of the human body. Even the pyramids in Egypt. I know, it's crazy. Don't get me started. Older than the Giza pyramid is the Temple of Karnak. The Temple of Karnak has a head, a torso, 2 arms, 2 legs, and feet. The Temple of Karnak has an ingress and egress through the nether regions, That's how you go into the temple, between the legs. You go into the portal to go into the temple. That's the only way you can get to the head, is through the, nether regions. They don't call them nether regions for nothing. Okay? All Thai temples, traditionally, and all of Laos, Burma, Thailand, are built on a plan that is a model of a human being's body, where you have the outside of your skin world, then you have a border, and then once you cross that border, the skin, you're now inside the person, and that is a sacred space. Outside, not sacred. Inside, sacred. And then once you're inside the sacred space, there are various areas that are designated as holy places, relatively more holy. There's an outside holy space, which is the first space inside the temple proper, where everybody can hang out, and sometimes there are people doing work, and sometimes there are people selling food and making music and doing different things that they do. And then there are temples with doors and lintels, where when you step over the threshold of that doorway, there are rules of behavior. In other words, literally 11 inches of space, and you can be one way on this side of that 11 inches, and when you cross that 11 inches, you have to be completely different when you come in this space. You have to be quiet, you have to have comportment, you have to behave, you can't break things. Some places you even have to dress a certain way, there's a dress code. And they emphasize it by making the doorways narrow, and then guess what? Not wheelchair accessible. Although nowadays you'll find a variation of that. But basically there's a lintel. Do you guys know what a lintel is? At the bottom of the door you see that strip, that's called a lintel. Okay? In a Thai temple, when you go into the bhat or the wat, the lintel's 11 inches high. You have to step over it. You have to step over it. You actually have to do it on purpose. You can't just accidentally walk into a temple. You'll fall down, because you'll trip over the lintel. Well, that's the whole point. The whole point is you're supposed to pause at the door and leave all your crap outside. And then when you step over inside the door, yeah, you're kind of the same person you were outside, but also kind of not. Because you just gave the wake-up call and the alert to the higher parts of yourself, to pay more attention, to be more alert, to be more present, to be more aware, to be more receptive. And therefore, you will be different inside the temple than you are out. You'll be different. And then how about this? Every temple has a place, a doorway that you can't go through because you're not a monk or a nun. We might call that the inner sanctum. Okay? But there's an area in every temple that ordinary people can't go in. You can't go in there unless you're, invited, like construction people can go in there and, But basically, if you're not a monk, you can't go in there. Can't do it. Not going to happen. Everything that happens in that area happens with and between people who are in the Sangha, who are committed spiritual people working on themselves. And if you're not one of them, you don't get to even observe. You can't go. There's a screen. It's blocked off. You can't see it. You can't go in there. And that's on purpose. And when you become a monk or a nun, you're ordained by the community. There are public ceremony outside the temple. That's for family and friends. There's private ceremony in the temple, which is mostly for close friends and family. And then there's this part of the ceremony the family doesn't get to see, because they take you behind the screen, where they do what? Chirothesia. In other words, there's a point in the ceremony where the abbot has to get a hold of you and declare you to be a spiritual being. And in some traditions, they change your name right there. That's where you're Bob over here, and when you come back out, you're not Bob anymore. You now have your spiritual name. That's true in both Sannyasin Hindu sects, right? And it's true in Theravada Buddhism, right? So there's a place where the monks have to lay hands on you. Now, they do that for two reasons. One is, just because you're faithful and student and have claimed to want to follow the principles and you've learned the vows, right, so you can recite them and take the vows, doesn't mean you're a spiritual person. You can still be a drug dealer. You can still be an alcoholic. So just because you're going through this process doesn't mean you're a sacred being. There actually needs to be a clear demarcation where you separate, if you will, the entities associated with your dysfunction to create an opportunity for the entities, allies, or benevolent deity energies to come closer to you to become the majority. And they do that by hand. All the traditional societies, Native Americans, same. We do it with knives, and it's bloody. But we do it by hand. If I pierce you, which I've done, I've been someone who assisted in Sundance, and I've taken flesh offerings, and I've pierced people, okay? It's bloody, and it's your hide, and I got my hands on you. You can't do it any other way. The medicine man has to get a hold of you to do it. No other way. We can't talk about it. We can't imagine it. We can't visualize it. We can't. No. I actually have to grab up a piece of your hide and stick a needle in it. Actually, that's how we do it. We use a needle to lift the skin and then take it's modern times. And we take a scalpel to snip it off. That's how we do a flesh offering now. It's sterile. Okay? But still bloody. Because it's got to be. It's your hide. Right? And I have to do it with my hands. So all the blessings for both the remediation of the evil, which could be evil's a metaphor. Yes, I believe there's real evil, but also think of evil as any thought process that causes you harm in your own head. Any behavior that injures your body in your body. Any way of being that causes your life to be less functional. That's evil. Anything that makes you less functional in your community, that's evil. Okay? So yeah, there's a sliding scale from, mass murder to, you're rude to your spouse. A sliding scale. But it's all evil. Okay? In Chinese medicine, the term that's now used is called pernicious influence, right? But you know what? In my Nanjing, I don't know if it's in here. Yeah, no, it's in the house. In my Nanjing, it doesn't say pernicious influence. I have an old translation because I got my acupuncture text in the 80s, right? They're not politically correct. Translation. It says evil. It says evil. It doesn't say pernicious influence. That's not in the Nanjing. It says the evil influences. And so whatever those things are, okay? So over time, our school, came up with a protocol based on Ayurveda to ward off evil and to attract good, to attract love. In other words, everything that's not love is evil. That's how do you define what's evil? It's not love that's evil. If it's not unconditional love, it's evil. If it's not compassionate, it's evil. If it's, do you understand? So even self-defense is evil to a degree. But we get passes for certain things, right? Because some people think self-defense is violent. I have swords on the wall. That seems to indicate a predilection to violence. If you weren't paying very close attention to me, you might think because I have sharp things on the wall or things that I can smack you with, that would be a predilection toward violent behavior. And you could, and I might not be argue the point, but I would say, no, it's only for self-defense. And defending yourself against violence is not evil. Okay? So we can go further with it. But let's come back to the map. Okay, the temple first. So the first Thai temples, in Laos and China and...
It was interesting. I found it interesting when you were speaking about folklore having, a basis in truth. And I was reading through and going through the schooling, I am a big colloidal silver user. And my husband brought something up. He was like, boy, do you suppose that they really knew when they were giving us these vampire stories and werewolf stories that silver would heal them, right? And that it wasn't just, just getting goosebumps. It was like, he was just like, hey, it just dawned on him and he's just like, hello. Because I was saying, there's basis in reality.
Well, the original magic bullet was a silver bullet for a werewolf.
Yeah. So,
the original magic bullet.
Like, wow, that's the
everybody's,
together, right?
In medicine, that's the holy grail, is the magic bullet, And, yeah.
There's so much that we don't...
And it's like, maybe you guys individually, give or take, are somewhat, or even a lot, familiar with different aspects of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
I don't doubt that. It's just that, for example, in the level 1, we're in level 1 today. My philosophy with this class is if at the end of this class, the only thing that you remember is how to do puja, I'll pass you. In other words, we're going to learn 19 positions and 5 attitudes over today and tomorrow, okay? And how to flow them. And it'd be nice if you remember that. It'd be nice, okay? But if the only thing you remember is literally how to do puja, I'll still pass you. Because it's the most important thing. So that's why I take a little bit of time, to go over it. And also, like for Elizabeth, for example, and this is for Elizabeth, I don't know that you've really heard me do this discussion before.
No, I'm hearing some new things.
Yeah.
And
you need to hear it from me. Other people say things differently,
I'm more inclined to learn in discussion than lecture, so I apologize if my having input is distracting for anybody.
Yeah, but it's not a discussion, and that's maybe a hardship, and I understand that.
Well, it's just
Okay.
I'm adjusting.
It's just that discussion has give and take, whereas actually my ambition right now, like later we'll do discussion, right? But and we do a lot, even Elizabeth will tell you, we discuss sometimes ad infinitum, okay? I love questions, but it's not a Q&A, not time for Q&A. Q&A's later. Because I have a lot of information that I have to spurt out in a short time period. Right? And then for the last year or so, I've been on the kick of trying to document as much as possible. And also because, even for myself, I never tell the same story the same way twice in a row. I'm a terrible teacher in that way, terrible, because I'm not consistent. I'll tell it, but it's also because even as I tell the story, I'm having different information.
Well, and Great Spirit is telling you what we need as well.
Well, and also in the back of my mind, one of the things that I do as a teacher constantly is ask, what do you need? What do I have that can be helpful for this person or for this person? I'm in a constant state of that. I'm not just doing sort of blurting some internal process. It's literally, there's something else that's going on while I'm talking, which is consideration of speaking to people's hearing.
Well, if you told the same story over and over again, then you'd be in the way.
Oh, well, and also, I'm a traditional teacher,
Yeah.
by the way.
I'm gathering.
Oh, no, I was looking like for
Oh,
you.
okay.
I was
Let me,
looking
let
at
me,
you.
s- I'm a traditional teacher.
It's like I never know.
And what I mean by that,
I'm like, I had it unplugged when I wasn't in class.
here, let me say this. So I'm a traditional teacher, and what I mean by that is I don't need a lesson plan. We're part of the original oral tradition. There's no lesson plan. There's not necessary. Like, I invented the first curriculum, the first written curriculum for this work. Even in Thailand, there wasn't a written curriculum until I made one. Okay? And it was absolutely not necessary for 500 years to have a written curriculum and then to follow it. There was no such thing. You learned what you learned from your teacher, and then you taught it to the next person the best way you could. Got corrections from your teacher as long as they were alive. And somehow the information perpetuated for hundreds of years through thousands of generations of telephone game. And you think ordinarily, see, that's why we know it's a miracle what we do. Because ordinarily in telephone game, human communication, if I could tell a simple story just to the people in this room, tell one person, tell you to tell her, you to tell him to tell him to tell her, and then have her tell me back the story, and it wouldn't be the same story. So how does that work over 1,000 generations? That people are still telling the same story, basically the same way. How does that work? Why does it work here and not everywhere else?
Well, I'd wager a guess. It's respect for the
I know, it's a rhetorical question.
I figured that.
No, eventually I'll tell you exactly how it works. Because again, it's not random, it's not mystical in that sense. It's not, we have to be able to understand it to do it. It's something that can be taught, and it's something that can be learned. And if it wasn't, then schools like our school wouldn't exist. Because they would go, in a generation, they would go. As soon as the charismatic teacher, elder, leader, founder, whatever died, that'd be the end of it, wouldn't it? It'd just be the end of it. Right? Okay. Yeah, let's go, because we'll do a little more, we'll take a short break, and then we're going to get hands-on.
So I think she's on her way, but
I think that there's two using the restroom to work.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I really love talking about puja. And, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll start. I'll wait. So, Rick, do you know the names of these?
No, sir. One of them's a Chris, right?
Chris.
Yep. That's the. It's a kukri.
Kukri.
Kukri. Thank you. And that one is Filipino. Is that Indonesian Filipino? That's the.
Kalis.
Kalis.
I was going to say copy.
In monkey wood.
Monkey wood.
Inlaid with mother of pearl.
Which I thought it was listed.
Inlaid with mother of pearl.
That's beautiful.
Oh, I thought it was
And
in a
that
sheath.
one
It's not in a
was.
sheath. That is the.
Oh, it is. It's in a sheath. That's the sheath. Yeah, that's the sheath.
Oh, just like this is the.
That's a, is that a salat dogger?
Paran.
A paran. Paran.
Parang.
Parang.
Could be Salat, could be, Mindanao. It could be Indonesian, it could be Filipino.
Right.
Parang.
Oh, okay.
And that's also Parang, just a slightly different style. This is very traditional with the head, with Garuda on the handle. See? So this is more Indonesian. This is more Thai. Because in Thai it's stylized, but in Indonesian they actually like to draw the head.
Head on the.
That to make the head, yeah. Okay, that was the intermission. What was the last thing I said?
Of the vision quest with the cornmeal circle, and you go in for 4 days. And
If we have enough juice, we'll be good. Okay, so in the vision quest, we've set out our prayer flags 4 directions. Okay, north, south, east, west. But in a square, and then we make a circle around it with cornmeal. This creates this idea that everything outside of that circle is the world, and everything inside of it is now sacred space. It's now a temple. So sacred space is just another way of saying temple. You can make sacred space anywhere. You can make sacred space in your house. You can make sacred space in your yard. You can make sacred space in your office. And we make sacred space by designating the mat or the table or the chair or whatever we're using, accoutrement, as being a sacred space. And we fully expect for something different to happen here than could happen there. Now, if I don't have designation of sacred space with like an object or stones or a mat or a building or what have you, and let's just say I'm out and about. Maybe I'll give you a true story of sacred space. I was on it, this is, oh my God, this really is so long ago. I won't say when, but it's pre being a married person. Okay, I was dating. And I was on a first date with a hottie. Okay, first date with a hottie. That's a special time. And I was also poor as a church mouse, so our date consisted of going to, in Atlanta, Georgia, a buffet restaurant called Ryan's Steakhouse with the salad bar and the baked potato, and you could get a ribeye if you wanted to spring a couple, an extra buck. You could get I don't know, it's $1 extra, but it's a date, so we'll spring for the ribeye, and then you get in line. You get in line to get your food. You got your tray, right? You know the scenario, right? Come on, you know the scenario. So I'm first in line. She's behind me. It's a date. I'm gonna pay for her tray, and in front of me in the line is an elderly couple. Okay, man and a woman. Woman in front, man next to me. As I'm going through the line, just doing my thing, salad bar, whatever, I realize that the man next to me is in severe distress. I mean, just the more I look at him, there's nothing right about him. He's elderly, he's not well, his color's wrong, and he looks like he's about to die. Going through the salad bar. So that before we get to the cash register, which is at the end of the line, that's where you're supposed to pay, whatever, how they do it at that place at that time. I stepped away from my tray. I turned to him. I put my hands on. I said, "Excuse me, sir." And he turned and looked at me. I said, "Can I touch you?" And he said, "Yes." And so I just put my hand lightly on him. And I said, "Sir, forgive me, but you don't look right. There's something really wrong with you right now. I don't need to know what it is. I just want to ask your permission. Can I pray for you right now? Right here, right now?" And he just stood there for a minute. Now, of course, I just stopped the line. Okay? And he goes, yes. And so I did. Right there. Not a long prayer, not for the trees and the grass and the water that flows and the snow that blows and the creepy crawlies and the swimmers and the winged, it wasn't like that. But it was to the point. What I felt, what I saw, what I felt. And then we went through the line and we got our food. And I went my way with my date. He went his way with his wife. And they sat down at their table. We sat down at our table. For just a couple of seconds, and I kind of went, can you excuse me for a minute? And I went back over to him. And I got on my knees next to his table. And he looked at me. And I go, spill. Just tell me. Just tell me. And he told me a story. And the story was he was terminal cancer. He'd had every procedure that you can have, lost many body parts, radiation, chemotherapy, and he was deteriorating rapidly and was expected to not survive more than a few more days. And he had bamboozled his wife to get him out of the hospital, out of the cancer ward, to go out on a date one last time before he died. But that's not why he was upset. The reason he was upset was he had 2 sons and a daughter who were fighting viciously over his inheritance, over their inheritance. Who's going to get the house? Who's going to get the car? Who's going to get access to what bank account? Who's going to arbitrate? Who's going to get access to the investments? Who's what? Bloody knife fight with lawyers. They'd hired lawyers and were already suing each other over their inheritance. He's not dead. This upset him. Disturbed him deeply in his spirit. So he told me the story. I go, okay, I get it. And I go, at this point, I'm oblivious to my surroundings. By the way, my date, I'm in a restaurant. It's busy. It's lunchtime. And I stood up and I go, right now, right here, I declare this space sacred space. The 4 corners of this table, I declare to be sacred space. And in the name of God, I'm going to heal you. And I laid hands on him right there, and I prayed for him right there. And I prayed for the trees. I prayed for his kids. I prayed for his doctors. I prayed for his wife, who's sitting right there, crying. However long it went, I don't know. However long. And then it doesn't matter whether he survived or not. That was not part of, when I say healed, I don't mean that he survived his cancer. That's not what I mean. Healed has got, in fact, that's irrelevant in this situation. Elderly guy, he's got to go one way or the other. You're either going to go from cancer or you're going to go by bus. As in, you step off the curb and the bus takes you out of the world. You're going to go by cancer or you're going to go by bus. One way or the other, you're going to go. You cannot change that. Healing is not about that. It can't be. But it can be about a lot else. So I shook his hand and I went back to my table where my date was gone. So while I was praying for the old man, my date left. She left. It's okay. In fact, it's probably appropriate because I'm acting strange. First date, I'm acting strange. Not serial killer strange, but different. But different strange, right? Not criminal strange, but different, but strange, right? Who does that? So I ate alone. And as I was eating, people started coming up to me in the restaurant. Just walking up to me and putting their hands on me. So it got to a point where I couldn't eat. He gets up and leaves. with his wife. Gets up and leaves. Doesn't pay any attention to me. Just gets up and leaves. And then a whole group of people came over and crowded around my table. And they go, "Do you know who that was?" And I go, "No." "Am I supposed to? Should I?" They go, "Well, he's our preacher." Well, I said, "What do you mean he's your preacher?" I said, "Well, we go to First Baptist, Atlanta, Georgia. He's the preacher at First Baptist in Atlanta, Georgia, a church with 20,000 members. And this is where we come after church. For our after church raid the buffet, which is not a stereotype, by the way. It's a real thing. Okay? And we know his situation. And no one's done this before. How is it that you were compelled to pray for him in public and get on to him like this? And I go, how was it you weren't? How could he go anywhere without somebody following him around praying for him? I mean, how's that even possible in a situation like this? I said, and no, and I'm not a preacher, and I'm not a special person, and I wasn't. I said, it's just that I am someone who responds to need, and I don't care circumstance or environment. So, this is me before doctor. This is me before medical school. This is me before. See, is the attitude, the inclination. And you know where I learned how to do that? From my granny. My grandmother taught me how to pray for people. Because sometimes when I was with her with a child, because mostly I was raised by my grandmother, okay? When I was with a child and we were out and about and she would see somebody she thought was in a harmful way or was having a rough time or what you might even call a homeless person or what have you, and she would literally stop the car, pull over and pray for them. Like literally. She couldn't go to Walmart. It wasn't a Walmart back then. There was what, 5 and dime? It was Woolworths. And they had, and I always liked to go because they had a snack bar where you could get a soda, you could get drinks, and you could get a hamburger while Granny was shopping in the back of the store. Win-win. You know? So, but she would not hesitate. She would not have, she was old school, Southern Baptist, what you would call fundamentalist kind of person, right? My family, very fundamental, you know, no makeup kind of people. That's my family, right? And Granny would just get down. She didn't care. She didn't care. And if somebody told her not to pray for someone, she would literally tell them to fuck off. She's from West Texas. She did not care. Okay? And she told me, Anthony, never be afraid to do the right thing, even if you die doing it. Never have fear over that, because God will preserve you. That's more important. All right. Now I go to Thailand, I learn Puja, I learn about temples, I learn about vision quest from my other family. And I learned that you can declare a space safe, you can declare a space sacred, you can declare a space special, and then you can get in it and you can be different. You can be Superman or Superwoman or Wonder Woman or whatever superhero fits your genre. I don't know. But you can make this as an intention and you can do it. And Buddhist monks have been doing this for thousands of years. And eventually they got tired of being in the rain and they got tired of dealing with the sunburn because you're sitting out in the sun and the rain and sleeping under the trees with the mosquitoes. And actually a lot of Thai monks still do that today. They'll do. I've actually seen a Buddhist conference with 1,000 monks that at nighttime when they went to bed, they just stick their parasol on the ground and take off part of their robes and drape it over their umbrella and then curl up around their umbrella. 1,000 in the woods at one time. It's crazy. India and Thailand, weren't buildings. They weren't buildings. In fact, for, we think, 500 years maybe, the first temples after the Buddha's time were just 4 stones. 4 stones. That a monk or monks would be somewhere, could be anywhere, somewhere, and they would go, this looks like a good place to meditate. This looks like a good place. We got water, we got food, we got some shelter, trees, natural surroundings. This looks like a good place to meditate. Let's meditate here. Let's make a temple here. And so then they would look around, and say, oh, look at this rock. Here's a nice rock. And they would pick this rock up and they would go, they have their alignment north, south, east, west, because they always practice. The Buddha taught sacred geometry, by the way. That's part of traditional Buddhism. Okay? So they always had this idea of orientation, north, south, east, west. They also were astrologers, all of them. Astrology is part of all these ancient traditions, including Native American medicine. And so they knew north and south and east and west and winter solstice and summer equinox and all that, because everybody does know this. You don't know it, you're like the only person who doesn't know this. So if we're going to do anything spiritual or energetic, first of all, we have to be able to find the ley line on the planet that we're on. We got to find, it's better here. Like when I decided to put this classroom here, I doused the property from front to back, side to side, and so on. And I asked the property where was the best place to put the building for the classroom. And if it had told me on the back side of the property, that's where this building would be. But it didn't. It told me here. And there was 5 giant oak trees here. This was not an open space. Every bit of open space here that you see, I made. I hired crews. I bulldozed. I took the trees down. One of them was 10 foot in diameter, probably about 700 years old. But I was told to put the classroom here. So the root ball of that tree is under this building, okay? Which I think is a good thing. I didn't have that root taken out. I didn't have the stump taken out, okay? So the monks would be out in the wilderness and they're walking along. They're like, let's put a temple here. And they kind of zigzag a little bit and they say, this is where the energy is. This is where the ley line is. They douse it, whatever they do. And they'll take one rock, they find one rock and they put it here. And they take another rock and they put it here. And they take another rock and they put it there. And they take another rock and they put it there. We got 4 rocks. And we say everything inside the corners of those 4 rocks is the temple. And everything outside the corners, that those imaginary lines drawn between those 4 rocks, is outside, not the temple. Outside, be any way you want to be. Do anything ordinary people do, okay? Like my Scottish clan motto, which is fight first and fill the fetters, okay? Which essentially means have sex, fight, and make yourself rich. It's my clan motto for the Murray clan. Okay, it's right on the thing, So, outside, inside, no. Inside, we're celibate, no sex. Inside, the 4 corners, no sex. Inside, no commerce. No commerce. Inside, no fighting. No fighting, no sexing, and no bamboozling, right? No fighting, no sexting, no bamboozling. Only good things. Only good thoughts to the best of our ability. We treat each other as if we believe each other to be sacred beings. We declare this space a sacred space. And then when we inhabit this space, we commit, and then through active discipline, hold our commitment to act differently than if we're 1 foot outside. 1 foot outside, different way, 1 foot inside, different way. And then inside this space, we practice being sacred beings because we believe we have the capacity to be so, as we were told by our elders, those who've gone before us. Our elders, our great-grandpas, great-grandmas told us that we have the ability to become more godlike than we ordinarily find ourselves to be. However, it's not serendipity. The only way that you can become more godlike than you are ordinarily inclined to be is you have to do it on purpose. And I don't know about you, but it's hard to be on purpose all the time. Have you ever tried to be on purpose for a long time? It's like, how long can you hold a single thought in your head without distraction, without losing the thread of it? Most people have the attention span of a gnat, which only has a lifespan of a few hours. So its attention span will be less than that. Because if its whole life is a day, 24 hours, a gnat, it's its whole lifespan. Birth, death, sex, family, relationships, job. 24 hours. So its attention span is notoriously short. Most people have a very short attention span because why? They don't practice holding long thoughts. And that's what meditation is. That's one of the functions of meditation, is to teach you how to hold a long thought. One of the functions of mantras is to teach you how to hold a long thought, even if it's just an om. Just one syllable mantra, om. And we're going to do some ohms because it's a great example. But we'll do other mantras too. But mantras can be like a Buddhist mantra, but a mantra could be Lord's Prayer. That's a mantra. It doesn't have to be om, doesn't have to be, it could be amen. It could be the name of anything. It could be a rose, right? Hold the thought. That's one of the core teachings of Vipassana, of Theravada Buddhism, practice of Vipassana or insight meditation, is you have object focused and you have, which is like where you put something in your head and then you try to keep it there for a time period, right? And we find that it's easier to hold an image of something that's beautiful. And also in today's world, why so many like sacred images are really artfully crafted and are quite attractive aesthetically is because they're meant to hold your attention as an object of meditation, not in and of themselves, but from the point of view of the exercise that I like looking at it, it holds my attention. It allows me to create an image of it in my mind that I can still see when I close my eyes. Which means I'm holding a thought in my head longer and more precisely and concisely than I would ordinarily be inclined to do so. That's technology. This idea, four corners, but this is the body. So everything outside here is the world, everything inside is me. Is the domain of my spirit, my consciousness, my intelligence, my life, my vitality, my elan vital, my whatever. But outside is yours. Inside is mine. Okay? The skin is that line between the four. Now, for hundreds of years, that was all a temple was four stones. And we still find those four stones everywhere in the world. We still find the placement. If you're ever out somewhere and you find four stones set out according to cardinal directions, spaced apart wide enough that you can get into the middle of them, chances are that's a temple. And then over time, people are people, right? So they started carving the stones. And eventually, they started carving the stones out of a tradition that developed into the shape of the Bodhi leaf. So the leaf shape of the tree that the Buddha supposedly sat under, which he did, I believe that story, because the tree's still there. So, in the shape of the leaf. And so now we had four sets of stones in four corners of an area shaped, that were carved in the shape of leaves. And now for another 500 years, that was a temple. And so when you went to the temple, you stepped across, and then you would sit in that space and you would meditate and you would do mantras and you would lay hands on each other and you would do different things, all the sacred activities that you were going to do. And then, you would go to the edge between the stones, and you always had to step over the line because you're supposed to stop and then step. Now, in Native American way, this is the protocol for Humbly Wimunki, which is the vision quest. Okay? So but you make your own temple. See, in order to do vision quest traditionally, in most tribes, not all, but certainly in mine, Lakota, Dakota, Hunkpapa, Sisseton, Wahpeton, Minikanju, Blackfeet, Sac and Fox, Crow, Arikara, Hidasta, etc., etc. You're going to do a vision quest, they do it all the same way. First thing you do is you got to make 4 flags. 4 flags. Each one colored for a direction, north, south, east, or west. You have to make them. You carve them, you paint them. Okay? Decorate them, if you will. And some people have traditional ways you do that. Other people say, just do it yourself as long as you know east is east, west is west, which is allocated. Then you go to a remote place where there's not a lot of traffic, okay? And you go, and you plant those, they're called prayer flags, even though it could just be a piece of wood, okay? You plant those in the 4 corners, and you declare that your sacred space, the sacred space. Now, in some traditions, then you take cornmeal, okay, and you make a circle around the flags. So now you have the circle and the square, the most sacred of sacred origin of sacred geometry. The circle and the square. Relationship between circle and square, by the way, is the relationship of all mathematics, all geometries, all, when I say all, I mean a capital A-L-L, is the mathematical relationship between a circle and a square. So in the Native American way, then we take the corn and we make a circle around our square. And then we declare that that is the sacred space, that is the temple proper. And then when you're going to go inside of it, you have to brush the corn away. To make the entrance, you go inside and then you have to restore the corn. You have to restore the circle. And then you stay there and you don't leave. And you do your sacred thing. And traditionally, 4 days is about average. Traditionally. You fast and pray and sing and
always find joy in the smallest of things. That is what we found in you. Oh, 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 you are joy. Never give up when the going gets rough. Hope is everything you need. Oh, 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 you are hope. Oh, 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 you are hope. And don't forget you're not alone. The Holy Spirit wants to guide you.